Do you influence to help people, or do you influence to get a commission? It's a tricky question. Let's talk about it on this episode of The Buyer's Mind.
Welcome to The Buyer's Mind, where we take a closer look deep inside your customer's decision-making mechanism to reverse engineer the perfect sales presentation. Now, please welcome your host, Jeff Shore.
Well, welcome everyone to The Buyer's Mind, where we investigate exactly what's going on in the minds of prospects who are considering a purchase decision. That's what this podcast is all about. It's about taking a stroll through the buyer's brain. I'm your host, Jeff Shore. You can read the full bio in the show notes, or you can visit jeffshore.com. While you're there, you can check out several events just for real estate sales professionals, including our 4.2 Academy and our Closing 2.0 Academy. These are great live sessions that will really boost your sales pace. Welcomed, as always, by our show producer, Paul Murphy. Hey, Murphy, let me ask you a question. We are called to influence people every day, and that's what we're going to be talking about today with Tim David. Do you think about that? Are you cognizant of your position as an influencer?
I'm not. I don't think I influence many people. I think more people influence me, like you. I enjoy talking with you. I get influenced by you all the time.
But do you think that there's just a sort of a shadow sense where we're influencing even, you're just trying to figure out where we're going to go out for dinner, and you know where you want to go out for dinner, right? There are those little bits of influence that infiltrate our life all day long.
We all know it doesn't matter where I want to go to dinner. It's where my wife wants to go to dinner. So I have very little influence in that area. My wife has lots of influence, though.
Right. All right. Good man. Well, let's look at it from this perspective. To quote Tim David, our guest today, he says, influence is what people do to help. If you're not helping others, you're not doing it right. And I think that as we get on our topic today on influence, it's interesting. It's very easy for us to confuse influence with manipulation. And that's why I love this quote from Tim David, that influence is what people do to help. This cuts right to the question of motives. Years ago when I read The Psychology of Persuasion by Robert Cialdini, I love the fact that early on he said, this book can be used for good or evil. I don't make any moral claims about it. But the fact of the matter is, if we are in sales, we are called to be influencers. But to what purpose? For the purpose of our commission, or the purpose of influencing people to help them do what is best for them? And that's really what makes all the difference in the world. That's what we'll talk about on today's episode. Well, as always, our show is brought to you by our good friends at Home Street Bank. Just want to take a moment to thank them. They're just not just our show sponsor, of course. They are my lender. I used Home Street in my last home purchase. Smoothest transaction I've ever had, and I've purchased quite a few homes in my day. But they are professional. They're dependable. Great rates, fantastic service. And if you're a real estate professional and you want somebody that you can trust to work with your buyers, you're not going to find anybody else who will take better care of your clients. So whether it's banking, home loans, credit lines, you name it, go to homestreetbank.com to learn more. That's homestreetbank.com. So before we get to our interview, let me bring you our tip of the day, and it is to do this. Test your best line. I want you to think about the best line that you regularly use in your sales presentation. That line that when it comes up, you enjoy it because you've got it down, you know exactly what you're doing, you've said it before, you know how to deliver it, and you have a tremendous amount of confidence in it. But now ask yourself the question, is it for your interest or for theirs? I mean, I hear some pretty slick lines that sound good in the moment until you realize that the line isn't about influence. It's about manipulation. It's about getting my way. So think through, what is that line that you just absolutely love to deliver? Ask yourself the question, is this for me or is this for them? I want to encourage those of you who are real estate sales leaders, sales managers, VPs of sales. We are right now enrolling in next year's Sales Leadership Roundtable. This is a mastermind group, a select number of sales leaders that I take through. We work together over the course of an entire year. We meet together face-to-face once a quarter in different cities around the country. We talk every single week. We have assignments that are built around your growth. And I have to tell you, this is We've been doing this now for 4 years, and we've had so many managers who have come back and said, my life has been changed. Not just my job, but my life has been changed. For me personally, these are all now good friends of mine. So if you're a real estate leader, if you're a sales leader in the real estate world, go to jeffshore.com/roundtable. I would love to have you along on this journey. All right, well, let me talk to Tim David here. I met Tim last month. He and I were speaking at the same conference, and it's just one of those things where there was just an instant connection. I just liked him right from the very beginning. I suspect a lot of people who meet Tim feel the same way. A prolific and very entertaining keynote speaker, expert on the science of human connection. He is the author of the hit book Magic Words, but he also has a brand new book just being released called True Influence. And to boot, a professional magician and mentalist. Did I hear that right, Tim?
You did. Maybe perhaps I could add ex-professional magician to that. I'm not doing much of the entertainment these days.
Yeah. But take us all the way back. Was it a childhood thing that you sort of brought into your early adult life? What happened?
Well, naturally, my mother was an accountant. My older brother went off to college, became a sound engineer, and works for Bose Speaker Corporation now. So I get some pretty sweet discounts.
Sure.
And my father was an ex-physics teacher who left that career to design nuclear submarines for the Navy. So
wow.
Magician was an obvious choice.
It makes perfect sense. You can see where those all three come together to exclude you as the black sheep of the family. So there you go.
That's pretty much how it happened.
That's great.
Yeah, if you want to see what disappointment looks like, tell your dad you want to leave school and become a professional magician.
Especially as somebody who's a physicist. That's amazing.
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and fly in the face of all of the laws of physics.
Sure, exactly.
For a living.
Yeah. So now, how do you explain what you do at a cocktail party? If somebody says, "Hey, what do you? You've never met him before." In 30 seconds, how do you tell them what you do now?
I help people become more influential. I mean, I think that's the bottom line, isn't it? I mean, if you want to move mountains, you've got to be able to move people. And this, for me, was a huge aha moment when I learned it. I thought being a magician, all I had to do was be a good magician. I thought that's it. But the truth is, it's not about the skill necessarily. It's not about the technical knowledge. It's not about the sleight of hand or the specific card maneuvers that I was able to do. It's how well am I able to translate that, number one, for an audience, but also how am I able to translate that to a buying audience, right? Because show business is two words. It's show and it's business. Business is the bigger word. Your listeners, you may have, quote unquote, the show piece down. Mm-hmm. You may have that technical skill or ability or the product or the service and are great at delivering that. But the business piece, the influence piece, I've found out early on that really is the secret sauce.
Let's get a little bit of definition here. When we talk about influential, when I first read Robert Cialdini's book on influence, the seminal book on the subject years ago, he basically says at the beginning of this book, this book can be used for good or evil. He didn't make any moral judgments about it, but can you just address that real quick here? Because on the one hand, we're called to be influencers in all different areas of our lives, and especially for this audience in our sales lives. And on the other hand, there's a point where influence becomes manipulation.
Yeah, one of the first chapters that I wrote for this book was really getting my thoughts onto the page about this, because this is something a lot of people struggle with. This is certainly something I struggled with early, and I really needed to be educated. I really needed to be let in on the secret that, they say nice guys finish last. It's okay. You can be influential and you still can maintain your integrity. See, I didn't know that. I thought influence was something that was, as you said, manipulative or some sort of evil pursuit. But the truth is, true influence is helping people get what they truly want. I mean, at the end of the day, aren't we selling people products they truly want and need? Aren't we sort of educating our audience on some of the benefits that they can receive and helping them make the right decision? Many of us in a consultative sales role will be happy to say, look, we are not the solution provider for you. I can help put you in touch with the right people, but my goal is to serve first and sell second. And if you can do that, man, I'll tell you what, I will let you influence me all day long. I need people sometimes to come along and kick me in the butt so I can enjoy some of the benefits life has to offer.
But now we'll talk about the book True Influence in just a moment, but going back to your book, Magic Words, you suggest in that book that whether we intend to or not, we are in this constant mindset of manipulation, of manipulating feelings, thoughts, that manipulation has a really nasty connotation, but there is a sort of a natural inclination for us to want to manipulate to some extent. Did I read that wrong?
Yeah. So what that basically means is, when I'm performing on stage or, performing a magic trick or a magic show, I would tour around and perform it a lot. The same trick, the same pattern, the same routine, the same way, and I'd get the same reaction. Mm-hmm. And then I would make these subtle changes to the script. I would make little changes in how I stand or small changes in some of the verbiage that I would use. And I would get big changes in the reactions that I would receive. Mm-hmm. And I realized that tiny things that we do affect the people around us. And we really don't have a choice. I mean, everything you do and everything you don't do literally affects the neurophysiology of the people around us. So we are affecting the brain states of the people around us. We are affecting the decision-making of the people around us just by our very existence. And some of us will accidentally manipulate people, accidentally influence people into an action, when what we should be doing is we should be influencing on purpose, again, for the benefit of all involved.
Does part of it just come down to a question of motives? Am I trying to manipulate you so that I can get my way? Or is it more about, hey, listen, sometimes people are their own worst enemy and they need to be influenced away from making a bad decision, which might be no decision at all?
Yeah, I would say absolutely, hands down, totally agree with that. I feel like sometimes that's exactly what people need. And like I said, I feel like sometimes it's exactly what I need. Mm-hmm. So as long as, and I think Tristan Harris, who was Google's ethicist for 3 years, he said the only form of ethical persuasion is when the goals of the persuader and the persuadee are in alignment. And again, how many times is that the case when the goals of the people that we're trying to help and we're trying to serve and we're trying to sell to and we're trying to influence, their goals really do line up with our goals. And in those moments, true influence can take place.
This is the whole concept of mutual purpose, right? I have a goal, you have a goal. If the goal is consistent, especially if the goal isn't fighting against each other, and I think that's what we find in the ugly side of sales, right? Is that my goal over here is actually contrary. This is one of the things that has always driven me a little nuts about some of the car selling environments that you will see where you get paid the most when I get ripped off the most. And that is absolutely the contrast to what we're talking about here.
Why do it the hard way?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Why would you want to do it the hard way?
Yeah. Let's talk about the book here. Give us the background on your interest in influence in general and why you wanted to write this book.
Well, my interest in influence stems from my interest in eating food. As a magician, if I'm not out there performing, I mean, I had to do, close to 300, 350 shows a year sometimes just to make ends meet. Mm-hmm. So I had to do a lot of selling. And in order to sell, it felt like it went against my nature. Again, a lot of the sales stuff that I had studied is exactly the type of stuff you're talking about. Car salesman kind of stuff. Not that there's anything against car salesmen, please don't get me wrong, right. But the stereotypical sort of used car salesman, archetype there. Mm-hmm. So I found that a lot of that stuff didn't work for me. I realized that I had to keep searching, keep studying. And also as a magician, man, the mind of the audience, and you have this podcast called The Buyer's Mind. I was fascinated with the audience's mind mm-hmm. because ultimately, in many ways, that was my buyer. Mm-hmm. When I'm on stage, I have to sell this illusion. And I was really fascinated with how the mind works and how psychology works, especially the form of magic that I do, known as mentalism. We're playing around with thoughts and perceptions. So psychology is a really, really big piece of that. And influence, my gosh, it was just so fascinating to me. How can I, a wildly shy and introverted person, who is passive to a fault, would never want to force anything on anybody. How can I share my art with more people? How can I get the word out there? How is there a technique that I can use that I could feel comfortable with? So ultimately, that's what began this quest, if you will, or this fascination or this love affair with influence. And it's led me to a place where I can, where I've been able to interview a lot of the top minds and collaborate with a lot of people who really do understand the secret sauce of what makes this stuff work. And over the course of my own life experience, my business experience, my clients' experience, I've sort of uncovered this hierarchy of influence, this 4-tier framework of influence that begins with Cialdini and then moves on up through the ranks to where you can be, again, the term I continue to use is truly influential. The concern is with a lot of people is that to become influential, you need a personality transplant. You need to be someone that you're not. You need to fake it till you make it. You need to put on this fancy suit, fancy, expensive shoes or jewelry or whatever it is to look the part. And everybody ends up just feeling like an imposter. So that doesn't help your influence at the end of the day. At the end of the day, that inauthenticity leaks and people can smell it a mile away. So the idea of true influence, again, this 4-part hierarchy really sort of came from all these years of research. I read about a book a week on the topic of neuroscience and psychology and influence. And again, fortunate enough to be able to collaborate with a lot of people in the field, and just really, really fascinated with this topic for sure.
So here's one rub that we sometimes see. It's the salesperson who does not feel like they have permission to be particularly influential. Like actually the first sales manager I ever had, this was way back in the day, but he said, Jeff, your job is to give people the information they need so that they can make an intelligent decision. And that advice made me a pretty lousy salesperson because I was great at giving information, but I was not great at influencing. And I see a lot of salespeople who feel like they don't even have permission because they don't want to come off as pushy. And yet I look at it and I say, if I have some sort of deadly disease or potentially fatal disease, and my physician comes to me and says, now, Jeff, my job is just to give you the information so you can make an intelligent decision. And I don't want to sway you in any way whatsoever because this is a very personal choice. I got to go find another physician. I want my physician. I want my attorney. I want the professionals in my life to be influential. In some cases, say, hey, here's 3 options, A, B, and C. B and C are stupid. Do A. But why is it in sales that we tend to look at it and go, oh, no, I just don't have permission to do that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And for me, I felt the same way. I mean, I'm a magician. I'm not a salesperson. At least that's how I felt. I'm reminded of those Star Trek scenes with damn it, Jim, I'm a doctor, not a whatever.
Sure,
I feel like this is my zone. This is my sweet spot. But again, in sales, maybe that word is all you need. Maybe it's just giving yourself permission, giving yourself permission to help people. And that's one of the things that I really identify influence as. Influence is what you do to help someone overcome their short-term objection so that they can enjoy the long-term benefits of what it is that you offer or the outcome that you're hoping for offers. So again, when you view it as I'm helping people to overcome their fears, their roadblocks, their obstacles to get to the end result that they want, man, then it becomes purposeful. Then it becomes almost like if you don't, you are hurting them in some way. You're allowing them to settle for second best. So I really believe it's all about perception.
Sure. I remember I was selling homes many, many years ago, and I remember I was selling brand new homes at a new home community, and I had a customer who was thinking about buying from a competitor because they were offering another $10,000 in discount than I was. But I knew for this particular customer, that was not the right house. And I remember the conversation so much feeling like if this guy walks, he's going to get the $10,000. He's also going to get the house that comes along with it. And every single day of his life, he's going to pull up to the wrong house and he's going to know it. And so I looked at it, I said, I have a moral obligation in essence, to save this guy from himself, because he's getting the right deal on the wrong home, and ultimately he's going to pay the price. And I was really pleased that I was willing to step up despite my discomfort and say, well, that's exactly what I said, by the way. Every day you're going to pull up to the wrong house and you're going to know it. And he thanked me afterwards, because I think I saved him from himself. I think that's what we do in sales. We guide people to the right decision, because otherwise, why would they need us at all? If they could make all the decisions on their own, why would we need salespeople in the first place?
Yeah, collect those stories. You know, there are stories that I have where I've been on both sides of that equation. I have seen it where people will come to me and say, hey, we talked last year about having you come in as a keynote speaker. We ended up going with somebody else. Man, we wish we hired you, because we had you this year, and we really wish we had you last year. So I let them down, so that's one of those scenarios where, oh gosh, if I had in that moment, in that opportunity, had been able to move that person to action, then things could be different. And then same on the other side, I have purchased inferior products and services and felt the sting of that, and felt the oh man, I'm kicking myself. I regret the decision that I made.
Sure.
If only somebody came in and stepped in and helped me out. So yeah, collect those stories. If you feel like sales is anything less than a noble pursuit, then maybe you're in the wrong business, or maybe you just need a mindset shift. Maybe you just need enough of those stories to realize the truth that, hey, you know what, as long as I can focus on helping people, then I think we're in good shape.
Did you, in your early days in the sales world, did you struggle with the imposter syndrome? Did you really carry that self-doubt that said, I'm not the person to be able to influence at that level? You referenced this early on, but I mean, it's a true psychological phenomenon that a lot of salespeople deal with, is that someday people are going to figure out, I'm basically just making this stuff up, and I'm really not all that I say that I am.
I mean, can you tell that I've gone through this? I mean, just the title of this book, True Influence, and the urgency that I feel of spreading this gospel that, hey, you know what? You don't have to be an imposter. You can sort of be your authentic self. And I'll tell you, when I started as a magician, I dropped out of school to pursue this dream full on, whole hog, and very, very quickly reality set in. And I was over $16,000 in credit card debt at the time, which for a 19-year-old kid in that time frame felt like a few billion. That's what it felt like. Right. And just had to get a side job, and really just banging my head against the wall, being frustrated, not able to achieve my dream, and unable to really master the skill that was truly important. But once a mentor pulled me aside and told me that, hey, show business is 2 words. It's show, it's business. Business is the bigger word. You got the show, you need the business. Once that light bulb went off, I went from doing maybe 1 or 2 shows a month, again, to very, very quickly, the very next month after working with him and learning these strategies, I did 17 shows that next month. The month after that, I almost doubled it to 28. And every month for 8 years, I did between 300 and 350 magic shows a year, with as many as 48 in a single month. So that is night and day, overnight turnaround. Sure. Simply from realizing that, hey, I can step into this role and own it because of all these things that we already discussed. This mindset shift was everything for me.
Going back to the book, True Influence, we're speaking with Tim David, author of True Influence. You mentioned the 4 hierarchies, the 4 tiers of influence, and you've structured the book accordingly to hit on each of these 4 components. Can you briefly tell us what those are?
Yeah, happy to. I mean, the word true is sort of an acronym for each of the tiers. So, for example, T stands for technique. It's so important to understand how our words are affecting the people around us, how our actions are affecting the minds of the people around us, and the decision-making of the people around us, how your standard operating procedures, the text you use in an email, all of our interactions are made up of these techniques. And either you're building influence or you're tearing influence down. So, you mentioned Cialdini's book, and he gives 6 techniques. Since reading Cialdini's book, I've sort of uncovered 61 various techniques, including Cialdini's 6, although he has more than 6 now. He has his Persuasion, which is fantastic.
Great book.
But so, I mean, if that's something, you know, I can share with your listening audience, happy to do so. There's a PDF report that I've put together with what I call the influence cheat sheet. And it's something I refer back to quite a bit when I'm putting together sales letters or marketing materials, or I know I'm going to be sitting down with a particularly important client and I really want to close the deal. I'll take a look and say, am I incorporating as many of these influencers as possible? So that's just at moreinfluential.com. At the very top right, there's a download free resources link. And if you click on the sales box, it's in the sales box of goodies. So that is the very, very first piece, the first tier. You can get pretty far with technique. You can move people to action. You can close some sales. That's great. However, the R trumps technique, and R stands for relationship. One of my mentors said, all things being equal, people do business with who they know, who they like, and who they trust. All things not being equal, people still do business with who they know, who they like, and who they trust. Relationship trumps technique. And this is something that, again, I sort of struggled with early on. I thought that if I just put together the fast talking techniques and made everything perfect and the best sales letter and the best websites, then that would be it. But once again, when you do that, people can kind of smell that, you know, this is sort of salesy. This feels a little bit, you know, like they're trying to get me to do something. So you've got to build that rapport. You've got to build that relationship. That is the next tier. The third tier, Jeff, is a big part of where you live here with this podcast. And the U stands for understanding. And understanding comes in a few different levels. Understanding human beings as a whole, understanding the buyer's mind in this case, is incredibly valuable. Sure, you can drive a car if you don't know how a carburetor works, right? But if you understand the mechanisms, you can get the most out of that vehicle. In fact, the same with people. If you can understand what it is that goes into the brain's decision-making process, then you can understand how to craft the perfect message that fits in nicely with nature's decision-making machine, the human brain. So if you can understand people as a whole, that's great. If you can understand maybe there's some cultural differences. If you're trying to break into a foreign market, you might want to understand people on a cultural level. And if you are in leadership or sales management, then you need to understand people on an individual level. And especially if you do one-to-one selling as well, you need to understand people one-to-one, because sure, most people may do X, Y, or Z, but that one person that you're speaking with right now is a little different than most, and maybe you need to understand them on an individual level. So understanding will get you very, very far, and there's a lot of shortcuts that I use as a mentalist to understand people. You know, for example, when people in my show would be called onto the stage, I would have to know them so well that it almost looked like I was reading their mind. And I had to do it very quickly. You know, I couldn't give them a Myers-Briggs assessment while they were walking onto the stage. It had to be very, very quickly. I had to ask myself a few questions about them, look at their body language, and really gather as much information as I could about them as quickly as possible. But the main takeaway here is this. When you're understanding people on an individual level, you want to be a gardener and not a farmer. You see, a farmer is a salesperson who has the same pitch for every single person. They sow their seed, they throw it out there. It's a numbers game. They hope for the best come harvest time. But a gardener treats every single plant individually, giving them different sunlight, different fertilization, different water amounts, and they care for each individual plant with different tactics and techniques. Right. So once again, the tactics tier would be like what a farmer does. Here are the tactics, throw them out, see what works. When you get to understanding, you can really cater your techniques and tools to that individual person. But the final tier, and I'll go through this very, very quickly, I know we're getting close to time here, is E. And E stands for ethics. And this is what I'm most excited about the book. As I did the research, I was kind of holding my breath. I was sort of wincing. Oh my gosh, I hope that nice guys don't finish last. I hope it's not true that you can cheat the system and win. I really, really hope that there is hope for the nice guy out there. And the truth of the matter is that absolutely is the case. The science has come back, and I'm sure even your own personal experience has come back, that nice guys don't have to finish last. And this was a big part of our earlier conversation, Jeff, about how the mindset of helping and service will really make you more influential and not less influential.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So the more of those tiers you can touch on, again, use it as a checklist if you have to. Am I using proper technique? Am I building relationship? Am I utilizing all the understanding I have at my disposal? And is this an ethical pursuit?
Love it. Love it. That is great stuff. And you built this website, moreinfluential.com, to support the book, and you've got all kinds of tools and giveaways there. It sounds like a great resource. His name is Tim David. He is the author of True Influence. You want to pick up that book and you want to go to the website right away. Follow him. He's, as you could tell even in this interview, sharp guy, smart guy, but also a good guy, and the type of people that I just want to associate with more. Tim, can't thank you enough for being on the Buyer's Mind.
Jeff, it has been my absolute pleasure, and I really appreciate you having me.
All right, there you go. Tim David, just a good guy. As I had mentioned at the top of the interview, I met Tim at a conference. We were speaking at the same conference and sat down next to him and said, "This is just a good guy. This is a sharp guy. He's a easygoing guy, but there's also an intensity about him. You could just tell that he wants to be great at what it is that he does. You could see it even in the way that he approached initially his magic, and then when he got into sales and in the world of influence in general. What do you think, Murph? Does he pass that good guy test?
I was disappointed. I wanted him to do some mentalism with him, but magic is so fascinating, isn't it? It's wonderful.
Yeah, it really, really is. I don't pretend to understand it, but I'm fascinated by it. Some really, really good stuff here, starting with the idea that, when we're thinking about how we are going to be influential, that it really is a question of motives. And I think he put it this way, to say that the goals must be in sync. And we talk a lot on the Buyer's Mind about this concept of mutual purpose. I have a purpose, my customer has a purpose. How do we get that on the same page? I thought he was very eloquent in the way he described that, didn't you?
I did. I appreciated the fact that his motivation, and the motivation that we espouse on this program all the time, is having that mutual purpose, is reaching out and trying to understand your clients so that you can meet their needs. It's not about what you're selling. It's about what their needs are and asking those questions.
I also love the idea of the sense of humble boldness, again, a sub-theme here in the Buyer's Mind. A few years back, I wrote a book called Be Bold and Win the Sale, about how we can overcome our discomfort in order to be more productive and effective in the sales world. And I saw that a lot in Tim. Tim is not arrogant, he's not brash, he's not in your face, and yet he is bold. He's got that humble boldness to him. And he had asked that question, how can I, an introvert, share my art with more people? That, my friends, is a great question for you to be asking yourself. How can you share your art with more people? And there's this idea here that when we are too afraid to step out, when we are too uncomfortable to step out there and be influential, we are doing our customers zero favors. We're actually doing harm to our customers when we make it difficult for them to do what they want to do anyway. Look, as I said in our conversation with Tim, if the customer could do this alone, why would we have salespeople? They wouldn't need us. So we've got to look at it and say we provide that service as professionals, like our physician, like our attorney, like our accountant. We need to see ourselves in that way. And in that way, we have to step up and look at it and say, I know you well. Now, look, I wouldn't trust my physician if he didn't understand me on a very, very deep level. I would not trust my attorney if she didn't really know who I was. So when you get to that point of truly understanding your customer, you are now in a position to influence in their best interest. Great conversation with Tim David. Well, as we head into the wrap up, I want to think about our role as influencers here. And we think, well, what are we influencing people to do? And the theme that we've had all throughout this discussion is how we influence in order to help people. But there are times when we look at it and we ask, how much am I allowed to influence? How much can I influence right here? I mean, I don't want to push people too hard. And I think that the answer here starts by asking what's in the best interest of my customer. But then I think we can get a clue from our physician and from our attorney and from our accountant and from those positions of authority that we see in our lives. I want my accountant to be an influencer. I want my physician to be an influencer. I want those people to know me so well that when they offer advice, when they offer a method of acting and persuade me to do it, I know that they are persuading in my best interest. They are thinking to themselves, this is what is best for Jeff. Now I want you to think the same way when you're thinking about your customer. If you feel that this is best for your customer, then you have an obligation to influence. You have an obligation to persuade. This is the idea. We don't want to just be there to hand out information and hope for the best. We want to be people who have a dramatic influence on the lives of our customers. Well, that's another episode of The Buyer's Mind. I want to tell you, if you're a sales manager, I've got an idea for you. You know, it's when we think about sales meetings, sometimes it's difficult to come up with topics, but here's an idea. Use this podcast as a training tool. You see, we design these podcasts so that they are the precise length of the average commute in the United States. So tell your salespeople, listen to this episode. Just send out the episode in advance and tell them, listen to this episode while you're on the way to the meeting. And then you can discuss the topic during the meeting while the topic is fresh. It's a great way to be able to leverage the material that you're getting and have a really great discussion, and it'll make your sales meetings easier to prepare for, but also very, very impactful. You can find everything you need at jeffshore.com, but until next time, go out there and change someone's world.